The 2023 NHL Draft is now complete. We just completed day 2, and today we're talking about who I feel were the teams that were the biggest winners and the biggest losers from this NHL Draft. We'll get into all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, the 2023 Draft has now come and gone. It's now completed. Hard to imagine how fast time goes, but here we are. Today we're going to talk about the teams that I feel are the biggest winners and biggest losers from this draft. So before I get into that, though, I just want to preface here that I think a lot of teams did really well. This was a really deep draft. There's a ton of good prospects that have the opportunity to become future NHL players, and I really don't think there's too many teams that royally screwed up their options here. I do think, though, when we get into teams that I felt are losers, they're really not that bad. It's just a case of where I think they could have made maybe a little bit better of a selection. So certainly I don't consider myself to be a draft expert, but I do pay close attention and watch a fair bit of junior hockey. Probably the prospects I'm most familiar with that I feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to discuss are the ones that would have been more first and second round. A lot of the guys, third round and later. I mean, there are some that I would know and some that I've seen and have an opinion on, but not in the grand scale of things. So I try to focus mostly on the first couple of rounds from the bigger names, so to speak. But let's get into the teams I feel are the biggest winners and biggest losers. First up, let's get into the winning side. And we're going to start with the Chicago Blackhawks. How can you not include Chicago when they were drafting first overall and had the opportunity to take Connor Bedard, a generational talent? And essentially here, I know they had luck to get the lottery, so calling them a winner might seem weird in a sense, but at the end of the day, they didn't screw this up. And you'd be imagined that, I've seen it happen before where teams have not made the right choice and years later have certainly regretted it. So walking away with Connor Bedard is a huge win for any franchise, but not only did they get Connor Bedard, they were also able to take Oliver Moore at number 19, which to me is a bit of a steal. I think Oliver Moore likely, at least in my opinion, should have went a bit higher, probably in the 10 to 15 range. To me, the Chicago Blackhawks left this draft and they're likely set up for years to come for their top two centers. I mean, if Bedard's going to be your 1C, Oliver Moore could certainly be a number 2 center. A lot of teams, I think he'd have the potential to be a number 1 center. I mean, he may not be quite at the level of a Bedard or a Fantilli, but it's not that drastically much slower. Great skater as well, and I just think that the Blackhawks did really well there. They didn't screw up number 1, which, like I said, isn't a huge accolade, but the fact that they were able to come in and get more in 19 was a real solid pickup, and I think they did really, really well. Washington, I really like the Washington Capitals here. Now, of course, the rumor was that they were going to be the ones to take Matvei Michkov, or they really wanted to, at least at number 8 overall, and it's hard to imagine the fact that they were not able to move up. I did not think that as this was going down that I was going to be able to put them on this list, but at the end of the day, they still did really well. And at number 8, they were able to get Ryan Leonard. I mean, that's still a great pick. Now, yes, it may not have the dazzle of Michkov, and we'll see long-term how this plays out. But Leonard himself is a terrific hockey player, and really an absolute great selection at number 8. And not only that, they were able to get another player who should come out theoretically as a draft steal at number 40 overall, Andrew Crystal, who's a very talented player. I'm surprised he went so late. I'd be curious to hear what the concerns were for teams. Most draft ranking services had him in the first round. I honestly figured he would be maybe no more than in that 20 range, maybe 15 to 20. Maybe he slips a little bit lower into the high 20s, maybe, but all the way to 40 was a shock to me. But the fact that Washington were able to take advantage of that and walk away with Leonard and Crystal with their first 2 selections is absolutely phenomenal. That to me was a great job. So I really like what happened to Washington. I really thought they were going to move up, and a lot of teams tried, but the teams in the top 4 or 5 picks, they were asking too much. And we'll get into some of them later as to why I think what they think they could have done a little bit differently. But either way, I think they did really well. San Jose, of course, were at number 4. I like what they did. They obviously got Will Smith. There was a connection between Smith and the Sharks. Obviously, Smith was teammates and friends with the son of Mike Grier, the GM of the Sharks. So obviously, he knows this player extremely well. Also a player that I knew Ken Hughes of the Habs GM also knew extremely well because he's coached him before in the past. But still, Smith for the Sharks is a great selection there. Again, I thought the Sharks had an opportunity to go with Minchkov, and I thought, even though I'm still calling them a winner because they took Smith, who was an excellent player, he should be a really good 200-foot player for them as well, a very talented guy. But they were a team I thought might go over after Minchkov because they're a team that's kind of in transition here. It's not like they want to try to win sooner than later, but to me, I think they could still be in the process of tearing things down. They had a lot of conversations at the draft with some of their other players on longer-term deals. Lots of speculation about Erik Karlsson being traded. We know for sure he wants out. He's talked about it publicly. There's been some talk that they did have some conversations around Captain Logan Couture, Thomas Hertl, although it doesn't sound like things really ever got too serious or too close. So I'm not sure we're going to see those guys moved anytime soon, but still, it's a scenario where I thought they could have taken a chance on Minchkov. They decided not to. And then he still had another pick in the first round, number 26 overall, where they had Quentin Musty. Musty was a very, a pick that I think a lot of teams were hoping to get in the later part of the first round if they could. A great offensive player who brings a lot of physical play as well. So they got a really couple of solid forwards and put their picks here to real good use. Another team that I'm labeling a winner all day here is the Columbus Blue Jackets. They've done a phenomenal job, not just this year, but the past couple of years, and they are slowly building what is going to be a really, really, really good team. You look at what the Devils have right now. The Devils are in the process of becoming a real force in the East and a real cup contender. I don't think they're that far from calling them that. I know they made the playoffs this year, which is the first time in a while, but I don't think they're far off from being a real legit cup contender. Like, look what they've done here. They've added Timo Meier to the deadline. They extended him. They got Tyler Toffoli. They look at like Hughes and Heischer and all these guys. I think the Jackets are on their way to building a very similar type team here. They were able to get Adam Fantilli at number 3, which is phenomenal. Sounds like he really wanted to go to Columbus as well. And then they were able to, at number 34, get his Michigan teammate, Gavin Brindley, who they have great friendship, great chemistry. So, again, a great pick. And then a couple of later picks that some players that I was a little bit more familiar with that I thought will be great there as well with William Whitelaw and Luca Pinelli. I mean, Pinelli's a little bit undersized, but very talented, extremely talented offensive player. Well worth taking a shot on, 114th overall. I mean, look at what else the Jackets have done here recently as well with their other recent picks in the last couple of years with, Yurchak and Matejchuk and they had Ken Johnson. They're building a lot. They have a really good base of young players under the age of 21, 22 years old. Sounds like Fantilli is probably going pro this year. He's going to likely leave Michigan. I know Jackets reporter here in Portsline indicated that the team and Fantilli had a really long talk after the first round about where he was going to play next year. And, of course, I don't think it's a firm decision, but the Blue Jackets brass seemed to leave thinking that he was likely coming to the team and likely going to play pro next year. But we'll see where things go. Either way, they've done a phenomenal job. I'm going to give them kudos here for a couple of years in a row. I thought the Flyers, I'm going to give them a winning vote here for being brave enough and bold enough to take Matvei Michkov at number 7. The rumors going into the draft that they were very, very, very interested and really wanted this guy. Apparently, we found out later as well, they actually had met with him a couple of times just since he came to North America for the draft. Ahead of the draft before going to Nashville, apparently they met with him in Philly and then again in Nashville. And he made it sound to them like he wanted to be a Flyer. They had the impression that he wants to play in the NHL, his dream is to win the Stanley Cup, and that he wanted to go to the Flyers more than any other team, which I found a little surprising given the Ovechkin Capitals connection, which we thought might be a thing because there was a lot of talk about that. But still, regardless, they took him, and he seems very happy to be there, which is great. Hopefully they don't have anything backfire on him when he comes and plays for them in the next few years when his contract expires in Russia. But the fact that they were able to do that and not be afraid to, I give them kudos. This kid is extremely talented, and it's probably going to see a scenario like Kaprizov in Minnesota where they have to wait a while, but well worth the wait. And he's going to be dynamic and be, the closest player, at least from what everybody thinks. He could be the most talented player, closest to Bedard more than anybody else in this draft. So, that's a few years ago when they were like 16 years old. That's what a lot of people thought, that he could even rival Bedard for first overall. But, of course, the Russian factor scares a lot of people off. So, to me, that was a great pick. And, of course, they had a couple other later picks for some second-generational players. So I think you're going to have real good potential, too, like Oliver Ponk at number 22, defenseman for the London Knights. Of course, his dad, Radek, was a longtime senator, both defensive specialists. Cole Knuble as well, so former NHLer Mike Knuble. Of course, connection to the Flyers there, ticket at 103. I like those picks very much as well, and think the Flyers overall had a great day. The Sabres, I like Buffalo. They are also becoming a real force in the NHL, and they just added another one by getting a draft steal. This one really fell in their lap, but Zach Benson slipped down to 13. Another guy I think could be a steal, and give them kudos for taking advantage here. But like Buffalo, to me, like they got Benson 13. I think that's a bit of a steal. Oliver Moore 19 to Chicago, a bit of a steal. Major Crystal at 40 to Washington. To me, that's a bit of a steal. Look, that's some real talented players. I'm surprised they didn't go higher, but hey, one team's losses, another team is gained, and we'll see long term. Of course, we don't know how things are going to play out. This is just what things are looking like and projected like right now, but time will tell. As far as the teams I'm going to label as the losers of the draft, and I'm just going to reiterate again, I don't think anybody really lost here hardcore. There's just a few teams that I think had some options that maybe could have done something a little bit better. But first and foremost, the Arizona Coyotes. They always baffle me at the draft, and it's not just the current regime here. Even go back to the John Chayka days. They just, I don't know what it is with this team. They tend to go off the board and make some really odd selections. And if they worked out and they looked like geniuses over time, I probably wouldn't say anything. I'd probably be like, okay, listen, you know what? They have a history of this working. I'm just going to shut up and go with it because they know what they're doing. I don't have like confidence here because I haven't seen that. Like, look at some of the other picks that they've gone off the board on, and Barrett Heaton, he hasn't really worked out. I mean, he's still there. He could still be a player for them, but not at the level he was drafted. Victor Soderstrom, another one. That's just a couple of examples where Chayka kind of went off the board and took these guys way early, and that they're still not regular or high, like NHL level talent that's having a lot of success. And then today, and then this year in the 2023 draft, they take Dmitry Simichev at number 6 and Danil Boo at number 12. And it seems like they're drafting because of their arena situation. I'm not saying these guys are not good players. They do have a lot of potential. Simichev was looked upon as being a real solid pick, but not at that level. Not at number 6. I don't think anybody would have him at number 6. They took 2 Russians in the first round, and neither one of them was Matvei Michkov. Like that, I never would have thought I'd say that at the end of the day when the draft was all done. The Coyotes, to me, I said they're drafting these guys. I feel like it's because they know that they're not going to come to North America for 2-3 years, and they need that time to sort of the arena. They need some prospects to be playing in Europe because they can't play. Like that. I just feel like their whole uncertainty about their future in the Greater Phoenix area is dictating how they're picking these players, and I don't get that, and just mind-baffling picks. So they're decent players. I think they could work out to be players for them. I just don't know that they're going to warrant those high of a selections, and we'll see. Maybe I'm going to be proven wrong on that, and I hope for their sake I am, but we'll see. The Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm labeling them a loser here as well. They did have a lot of picks, which is obviously unfortunate, but I understand why. Obviously, the fact that they've gone forward to playoffs and moved a lot of these picks, and they haven't had the playoff success they were hoping for, kind of hurts them. But I give them kudos for being aggressive and going for it. But they had the first rounder, number 28 overall, and they take Easton Cowan, who's you call a tenacious forward with the London Knights, decent playmaker, but nowhere near first round talent. I mean, and I understand the reason why they probably took him is because they didn't have a lot of picks, and they probably looked at this and said, okay, well, do we try to trade this pick and we can maybe get this guy, a whole other round or so away, maybe we can get an extra asset. They could have done that, but instead they're like, yeah, we don't have a lot of picks. Nobody's really budging on moving. Let's just take the guy that we'd like to take in a couple of rounds from now instead of now, and just get it done with. Which, okay, you watch him play, you watch some of his highlights. There's stuff to like, but to me, he projects as a bottom 6 forward like a tenacious, hardworking, checker, which is fine. You need those players, but typically they're not first-round picks. So to me, I think they had some other options here that they could have went with. They could have taken Gavin Brindley, could have went with Andrew Crystal, just a few other examples of it. I just think they couldn't get this player later, or I don't understand why moving back would have been so challenging at that point. I know a lot of teams were trading, but I can understand trading up would be much harder than trading down. The Minnesota Wild at number 21, they take Charlie Stramel. Again, another pick that I was kind of surprised that you can call that going off the board. Most draft ranking places had him ranked much lower, like at least one whole round away, maybe two in some cases. Probably average out. I think the highest he was ranked that I seen at least was in the low 40s. A lot of them were 50, 60. So to go 20, again, that's a bit of a stretch, a bit of a reach. Not sure this guy really projects to be much of an NHL player. If he does, it's going to be low end and it's not high end stuff. And they still had guys like Gabe Perreault, Callum Ritchie, Gavin Brindley on the board, Andrew Crystal. To me, that would have been a better selection than what they picked here. Just mind-boggling. So, I don't really like the Minnesota selection there. So I'm putting them in this category. And this one is maybe a little more controversial, and I don't mind this pick as much as I think a lot of the fans do. I just really don't know. But Montreal taking David Reinbacher at 5. I like Reinbacher a lot. If you watch this channel and you watch a lot of my mock drafts, you've seen that I always consider him and we're always consistently refer to him as what I feel to be the best defenseman in this draft. No doubt. That was my opinion from quite some time back, probably at least about 6, 7, 8 months ago. That was how I felt about the prospects here, that he was the best-looking prospect defenseman in this draft. So I'm not shocked that he was the first one off the board. I just feel like this might be a little high. Now, some of the mock drafts I did, there were some speculation, some teams that were high on him that, I did put him a little higher than I probably would have liked to a few times. So based on what I thought teams were going to do. Because when I do these mock drafts, a lot of times I'm going not only with my own opinion, but it's more based on what you're hearing in the rumor mill for what teams are going to likely select. You start to hear time over time about teams like certain players, and that does influence the decision. But in my opinion, Montreal, they really wanted Reinbacher, and they talked about this after the draft when they spoke to the media. Marty Lapointe said that their entire staff making the decision here, that they were all in unison, that every single one of them said Reinbacher is their guy, which I find hard to believe. I can't believe there was more of a debate. I'm a little surprised they didn't want to take Michkov, given their connection with Nick Bobroff, their head scout, being such knowledgeable about the Russian players. I thought that might be the link to influence them to take Michkov, and it wasn't. Okay, fine. Maybe you don't want Michkov. You're concerned about the time frame for him to get to North America. Maybe you're concerned over character issues. There was some things about talking about that as well. But still, other options. You could have probably had Reinbacher. If you look at what the other teams wanted, you knew Philly and Washington, both that were coming behind you, wanted Michkov or one of these other guys. So you knew they weren't going for Reinbacher. You probably knew that Arizona wasn't going for Reinbacher. You probably could have drafted, moved back to at least 8, if not one of the other ones. But Philly or Washington, who wanted to move up and were trying hard to move up, why didn't you do that? To me, you could have got an extra asset here and still got your guy. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. But I like the player, and I've seen all kinds of fan reactions of Habs fans losing their minds, breaking stuff, going out of control because they hate this pick. He's going to project to be a real good defenseman. And to be honest, based on what's already in the Habs prospect pool, I think he's likely going to be the best of those defensemen, which is why they wanted him. You do win championships with defense. Remember that. And I can understand that there was a lot of talk that they wanted Will Smith or they wanted Ryan Leonard. And meanwhile, you didn't hear a lot about Reinbacher and the Habs. So, I don't know. It's a little bit confusing. But they also have a ton of D already. And they do have some good young forwards too, but not as many as they do defensemen. I thought there would have been a prime opportunity, even if they didn't want to go with the Russian Michkov, that they could have taken either, could have went with a Ryan Leonard, for example, or something to that effect. But they didn't. And because they didn't, the only reason I'm putting him as a loser is I love Reinbacher. I think he's going to be awesome for them. I just think they could have taken him later and moved back and got another asset too. Like if they traded with Philly or Washington, you could have got the 7th or 8th pick obviously swapped and then something additional. I mean, it doesn't matter what that additional is. It's still an asset you now own. So anyways, either at the end of the day, the losing teams outside of what I would, maybe Arizona, the rest of them, not bad losers, especially Toronto, Montreal. They're really not that bad. I just, if I had to pick somebody, these are the ones we're selecting. But a lot of teams did really well, all kinds of great talent. Be curious to see how it all works out. Of course, we won't know for a few years, really, to have a good indication on how things are really looking. So let me know your thoughts on the top teams who won and lost of this draft, and we'll talk about it in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.